I am 25 years old, female. My husband is turning 27. We have a daughter. Now she is still very young and holds a special place in my parents' hearts, having become their first granddaughter. They promised us all the support that they themselves unfortunately did not experience while raising me and my younger siblings. Now in the 7th week of my second pregnancy, I am facing a high risk to my health. My therapist strongly recommended that my daughter spend the night out of the house at least once a week. This would allow me to rest better and make time for myself. After raising this issue with my mom, I received a positive response. However, 6 months later, when my brother and his spouse and their newborn baby moved in with my parents from North Carolina, the situation changed. Our weekly visits with my daughter at my parents' house became a rarity. With the start of my job in July and the need to watch my daughter on Fridays when my husband and I are busy, my parents became less available due to their own activities or traveling. Under such circumstances, I had to turn to my aunt for help, as my parents were no longer offering to help on their own. On more than one occasion, my husband and I requested them to keep our daughter with them overnight, especially when we wanted to celebrate our wedding anniversary, albeit late. The last few weeks have been particularly difficult for me. I am feeling tired and unable to find opportunities for adequate rest, as my daughter has stopped sleeping well at night. Only when I put her to bed around 10 p.m. does my short-term relief begin. I called my father late in the evening, and he immediately asked if I was okay after hearing me call at such a time. Unable to contain my emotions, I burst into tears, begging them to take our daughter in the next night. Fatigue had pushed me to the limit, and I felt like I just couldn't make it without a break. However, my father's response was to advise me to take my time doing chores, which only added to my frustration. After I, frustrated, told him to forget the request and hung up, he called back 5 minutes later. This time he tried to convince me to accept the circumstances and learn to manage my time better, given that we were about to have another child. My patience was wearing thin. I made it clear that if they didn't want to be the support they said they were, then we would no longer seek their help and would turn to my aunt. I suggested that if they had time, they could contact me themselves and we could decide if we were comfortable. My husband supported me, saying that it is not our responsibility to convince the grandparents to be present in our children's lives. If it's important to them, they should make time for their grandchildren on their own. I ended the conversation by emphasizing that if they wanted to see their granddaughter, they could call me. From now on, I wouldn't have to worry about watching her while I worked or asking to keep her overnight. I told them that I would be self-sufficient and that I didn't need their help and hung up. The tears didn't leave me until the night before, when I lay in bed next to my husband until 1 a.m. reproaching myself for what had happened. To clarify, my brother and his family do not live with my parents now. My parents are in their 40s. My mom hasn't worked for 8 years and my dad is busy at work Wednesday through Sunday. Growing up, my parents would often send us to my grandparents on my mom's side any chance they got, whether it was to spend time together or to organize a night out for ourselves. We even spent entire weekends at their place. Previously, my parents were regularly involved in babysitting my brother's daughter several times a week, which sometimes led to arguments. I often lend money to my parents and am constantly doing various favors for them. They often talk about the importance of grandparents' role in their grandchildren's lives, but don't always seem to follow their own advice. My husband's family is unable to provide support as we live far away from them, separated by the distance of many states. Understanding and respecting access to your own children is important and should not be used as a means of pressure. Managing 2 children is really difficult, especially when sleep becomes a luxury and living from paycheck to paycheck leaves no room for hiring a nanny. Using parental help as free childcare may seem like a way out, but it is important to remember that everyone has their own lives and commitments. The fact that parents have previously helped with your brother's children does not mean that they will always be available in the same way. Time that was previously given to help may need to be taken up for vacations or other responsibilities. Understanding and empathy for the situation is important, but it is also important to recognize that childcare is the responsibility of the parents, not the grandparents. Advice from a father about better time management with the arrival of a second child makes sense. You can't always rely on others for help. This is especially true of the financial help that adult children sometimes give their parents. If that money can be used for childcare, it may be a better decision. Expressing regret that you were often sent to your grandparents as a child is important, but it's also important to appreciate the promise of support your parents wanted to give you despite their own experiences. The question of why they didn't have that support is worthy of reflection. Stopping your parents' financial support and redirecting those funds to childcare can be a practical step. It might encourage your mom to look for a job, which could bring additional financial stability to the family. Next story. During the period when my children came into this world, I decided to set up a savings account for both them and my mother. From that time onwards, I started saving a certain amount of money into these accounts on a regular basis. My daughter, who started her working life at the age of 12, first worked part-time jobs in the city. These were temporary jobs until she was 14, but after that, she got a permanent job. She accumulated all the money she earned in a savings account without spending a fraction of it. Because of this approach, by the time she got to college, she had more money accumulated in her account than her twin brother. When it was time for college, we parents provided financial support for our children. Monthly transfers covered basic tuition needs and also provided a little extra money for personal expenses. The children could use the funds from their savings accounts after they reached adulthood. Gradually, when we stopped the monthly installments, my son started withdrawing small amounts from his account occasionally. Even so, after 2 years of college and regular use of the funds, there was a noticeable difference in their accounts between him and his twin sister. To add to this, my daughter, while working part-time, continued to save approximately 50% of her earnings, which increased her savings already started before college. This past weekend, when my children returned home from college, which is only 2 hours away from us, they joined a family dinner at my mom's house. This has become our tradition almost every weekend. During one of these dinners, my son overheard my daughter discussing with my brother about wanting to start investing. Jokingly, he remarked that they already had plenty of money, to which she ironically responded by emphasizing his approach to finances. Smiling sarcastically, he returned to the conversation. However, when we got home, my son asked my daughter to show him her bank account. Despite her embarrassment, she agreed. His reaction was violent. He began to express his displeasure loudly, so loudly that I can't even remember all of his words. Eventually, he demanded that I make up the difference between their bills, claiming it was unfair. My daughter looked at him like he didn't understand the obvious and explained that her savings were the result of her labor and saving. Not accepting this, he continued to insist on equality of means between them. I tried to explain that I couldn't equalize their financial situation, especially since I was already paying for their college tuition. I suggested that he earn his own income if he wished to have more money. This suggestion made him furious and he retired to his room, after which he stopped communicating with us. My daughter shared that he even avoids looking at her, and even his friends noticed the change in his behavior and approached her for clarification. I am puzzled and concerned. I don't want him to be alienated from his family and friends because of this situation. At the same time, I can't and don't want to make concessions because my daughter has earned this money through her hard work. I believe it would be unfair to her if her brother got the money without any effort. I am truly sorry that your situation has been such a difficult time. Your daughter has undoubtedly put in considerable effort working hard over the years. Her choice to invest her earnings instead of spending them recklessly shows her responsible approach to finances. This has resulted in her accumulating an amount in her account that is larger than what your son has. Your son may not have fully realized the significance and importance of such work and savings. Your situation is such that compensating for the difference between the children's accounts is not only beyond your financial means, but would seem grossly unfair to your daughter. Your son, being on the cusp of college and having the means to pay for the extra expenses, is already in a favorable position given his lack of student debt, a problem faced by many of his peers. His behavior, which expresses ingratitude and a desire to get more without corresponding effort, can serve as an important life lesson. Working and consciously managing his finances can greatly improve his financial situation in the future. It can also help him realize that you, as a parent, cannot fix every situation he perceives as unfair. Refusing to meet his demand is not an act of injustice, but rather a concern for his upbringing and preparation for independent living. Now I want to tell a different story. I'm 18 years old now, and I'm a girl. I remember when I was only 5, my mom passed away. She left behind a necklace that held a special meaning to her. This piece of jewelry wasn't just an accessory, it was a part of her. Before she passed away, my mom passed it on to me, saying it would be a way to remember her. She believed that this necklace would help me feel her presence when she was no longer around. I cherished and treasured this gift, realizing how important it was to her. When I turned 7, my father remarried. Not a couple months later, he and his new wife had a daughter, my half-sister. One day, when she turned 6, she asked to wear my necklace. I refused, not wanting to share such a precious thing to me. My refusal caused disappointment to my father and his wife. As a result, my father made me take off the necklace and gave it to my half-sister, saying that it now belonged to her. In his opinion, I had acted immaturely and cruelly by denying her such a request. This incident caused a heated argument between my father and me. His wife also intervened, claiming that I valued the necklace more than my half-sister's feelings. The conflict didn't last long, but the tension remained for many more months. I felt deep frustration and anger because the necklace was now in the possession of my half-sister, who refused to give it back to me. My attempts to take it back caused screams and arguments. Things escalated 2 years ago when she accidentally broke the necklace. I was there when it happened and couldn't contain my emotions. I angrily blamed everyone for what had happened, yelled, and declared that I would never forgive them. It took me a month to realize that my half-sister also had special feelings for the necklace, perhaps even stronger than my anger. Somewhere inside, I knew that the necklace had meaning for her too. My father tried to apologize, but I refused to accept his apology. His wife accused me of callousness and said that I should be ashamed of my feelings for the necklace, which had become an object of greater affection than my half-sister. I, on the other hand, replied that my love for my stepsister would never be what they expected. I added that they had only themselves to thank for the current situation. When I turned 18, I made the decision to move in with my grandfather. We had discussed this plan for a long time, and he helped me get away. My father tried to hold me back, and my half-brother and sister expressed their upset at my leaving. They wanted me to stay, but I was resolute in my decision to leave and had no plans to return. My father wasn't even deterred by the fact that I blocked his contacts after endless attempts to contact me. He even showed up at my school last week, begging me to come back and talking about the need to discuss the details of my upcoming graduation. I told him that his presence at the ceremony was not required since he would not be invited. He insisted, assuring me that he would be there because it was important to him. I looked him straight in the eye and told him that if they came, I would simply not show up at the ceremony, depriving him of the opportunity to see my graduation. He countered that I was being too drastic and should find the strength to forgive. But I stood my ground, not feeling obligated to make concessions. You owe no one anything, especially after your father and his new wife did such an injustice by forcing you to give up the necklace that was a gift from your mother. While it's hard to blame your stepsister, since she's just a child, adults should have done things differently. Remember, you have the right to have no contact with those who hurt you. This situation is not your fault. Your father is now facing the consequences of his choice to choose a new family over you, and that is his mistake. Saying that you should find a way to forgive when he himself has made no effort to earn forgiveness is wrong. His actions show that he is putting his interests ahead of yours. What about the necklace now? If it were in my hands, my relationship with my father would be cut off forever. It's hard to realize that you've lost not only your mother, but also your father, who through his actions has only added to your pain. By taking away the only physical object your mother inherited from you, he acted inexcusably. Such behavior cannot be excused. It is weakness, not childcare. When you can recover the necklace and are ready, it might be worth calling him, explaining your position, and then letting go of all that resentment and pain as if they were a balloon flying off into the sky. This doesn't mean forgetting or forgiving all resentments, but a step towards releasing them. My next story. My husband and I are raising 5 children. Our family is represented by Alina, who is 25, Michael, who is 24, Maya, who is 23, Andrew, who has reached the age of 20, and Emma, the youngest, who is 16. My husband, although not very active in the parenting process, occasionally delighted the children with fun outings. However, the main care of the children fell on my shoulders. Our older children have grown up to be quite successful and kind people. Elena is studying in medical school, Michael works as an electrician, Maya is employed in the field of medical services as a nurse, and Andrew is preparing to become a medic. All of them were obedient as children, although they allowed themselves some harmless pranks. For example, Alana was once addicted to vaping e-cigarettes for a month. Michael was sneaking around with his girlfriend. Maya rarely took time for homework, and Andrew sometimes got into arguments. Nevertheless, they maintained a good relationship with their teachers, performed well academically, and were generally good people. Emma, our youngest daughter, on the other hand, has always stood out among her siblings. Her journey was not easy from the beginning. She was expelled from her first kindergarten, and in elementary and middle school, she often faced disciplinary measures. Because of her behavior problems, we were forbidden to take her on school field trips. The school insisted on double evaluations of her behavior and counseling with a specialist. She is now in public school and sees the school psychologist regularly. However, Emma still frequently gets into unpleasant situations, so much so that I am corresponding with the dean of her school by name. She is still banned from school trips, and we are not sure if she will be allowed to participate in other school activities. Last month, she attracted attention by stealing alcohol from her friend's parents and getting so drunk she had to be hospitalized. Emma skipped school 3 times, was detained 5 times, and broke the law by taking her friends to the mall despite her restricted license. She began using insults against family members at the slightest annoyance. I find it difficult to impose disciplinary measures because my husband thinks my methods are too strict and expresses his bewilderment. When I try to impose punishment, Emma just laughs and walks away. Using her physical advantage, she is 6 inches taller and much stronger than us, to intimidate me and my daughters, and treats my sons particularly aggressively. The disagreement with my husband escalated after I took Emma's car keys away from her for going to the mall with friends without permission. My husband noted that this behavior was typical of a teenager, accused me of being biased against my daughter, and defended her actions. In response to my arguments that such behavior was unacceptable, he suggested that I take on the responsibility of raising Emma on my own. As a result, I packed up and temporarily moved in with Maya. I also notified the school that any further questions about Emma should be addressed to my husband, as I refused to take responsibility for her behavior. My husband called me repeatedly, urging me to return and emphasizing the importance of my presence for Emma. I responded by stressing that it was time for him to take charge of his daughter's upbringing, especially given his views on her behavior. He accused me of cruelty and bad parenting. I am now convinced that our marriage will probably end in divorce. I sought validation for my decision to walk away and leave it to my father to deal with Emma, as he did not see her behavior as problematic. Making the decision to leave the situation shows your responsibility as a parent. Your husband, unfortunately, does not see the depth of the problem and lessens the importance of the rules and punishments you have established. These measures are designed to help Emma become a responsible and independent individual. It is important that he recognizes the seriousness of the problem with Emma and realizes that she needs professional help. Your decision to make him take full responsibility for her upbringing may be the only way out. Much of the behavior you described does not fit the norms of adolescence, and it is surprising that he thinks otherwise. When he continually minds your attempts to introduce any discipline or structure into Emma's life, it is clear that you acting together as a team is becoming impossible. He seems to prefer to remain the fun dad without taking responsibility for solving problems. It is important to talk honestly with Emma and explain to her why you were forced to withdraw. She is old enough to recognize the reality of the situation. You can't ignore the seriousness of her actions, especially when it comes to something as serious as an alcohol-related medical emergency. If the problem behavior started early enough, it is worth getting seriously concerned and considering the possibility that it may have been a response to some internal or external factors rather than just bad behavior. You should investigate whether there was a medical, physical, social, or emotional reason that led to this behavior. Although your husband may not fully realize the seriousness of the situation, his unconditional love and support for Emma is important. However, it is important that both parents work together to help her overcome her current difficulties and grow into a mature person.